know you have played too much Hearts of Iron 4 when you call it a platform instead of a game. But tell me this, when was the last time you played HOI4? Completely vanilla. No Road to 56, no Kaiserreich, not even a UI mod, just raw, unfiltered 2016 era HOI4. Exactly. Because here's the truth. HOI4 today is less of a strategy game and more of a community-powered Frankenstein monster, and I love it. Vanilla HOI4 isn't terrible, but it's painfully outdated compared to what the community has done. The AI still struggles with the basic tasks, most nations have boring generic focus trees, the war always starts the same way, and even with the latest DLC, it still feels like an unfinished game. Ever tried playing, for example, Island in vanilla? Well, good luck finding anything meaningful to do until 1942. And even then, it is just sending 12 divisions to get slaughtered by Germany. You don't play vanilla HOI4 for the story, you play it because your mods didn't load. But once you installed your first mod, everything changes. Suddenly, this rigged World War II game becomes a canvas for literally any setting, genre, or timeline you can think of. Want a dystopian future where Germany rules the world? There is a mod for that. Want to roleplay as a mutated raccoon warlord in post-apocalyptic Arizona? Yup, that is in the game too. Modding is so deeply baked into the community that Paradox basically relies on it to keep the game alive. And these aren't just small tweaks, most of the big mods are AAA level overhauls with custom UIs, soundtracks, events, and tech trees bigger than entire DLCs. And let's start with the mod that started it all. Kaiserreich. What if Germany won World War I? That's the basic premise, and you got HOI4 to rewrite history but ended up rewriting your sanity, trying to understand the UI and 500 different game mechanics. And yes, HOI4 has a tutorial. I figured that out after more than 900 hours playing the game. You will almost always pick Germany for your first game. And you will probably have no idea what is the difference between research and national focus. Never mind the stats like political power and command power. They are just weird numbers to you, and when you want to build something, you got confused between civilian and military factories. And at some point you will discover that magical pattern, which is justify war. And you don't even care who it is on. Whether it's France, Luxembourg, or random South American country, you just want war. And after wasting hours, you finally discover the division designer and proceed to create the worst possible template known to mankind. Then some time passes and you finally get the hang of the basics. Focus trees, research, factories, you even learn to make decent templates. And then it happens. Your first encirclement. Doesn't matter that it is a small number of divisions stuck in a tile, at that moment you feel like a military genius. Of course, once you are done feeling like Rommel, reality hits. You started pushing into the Soviets and it's going well, but then your army is starving in the middle of nowhere. And that's the moment when every HOI4 player learns the real final boss of the game. The supply system. Then comes that painful moment every HOI4 player knows all too well, the air war. You finally notice those little plane icons on the map, and the next thing you know, you are staring at air zones, mission types, range, and some random number called air superiority. And no matter what you do, the AI somehow spawns over 2000 fighters out of thin air, while your brave little 200 planes air force is getting crashed instantly. And once you have learned enough about the air war and the supply system, the real grind starts. The micromanagement. This is when you stop playing at speed 5 and drop down to speed 3, maybe 4 if you are feeling brave. Suddenly you are not just fighting a war, you are assigning generals, tweaking division templates, and setting fallback lines. Eventually, after countless battles, the war ends. Victory is yours, or so you think. Because then you meet the peace conference. And that's when you realize that your dream empire isn't achievable just because you don't have enough war participation. And when you reach 1944, your PCs start screaming because you officially declared a war on your CPU. But then you decide to start a new game, but this time you want to do achievements. And that's when you realize that the real achievement is not uninstalling the game. Every attempt ends the same way. Rage quitting at 2 AM and promising never to try again. But yet, you go with the same process again tomorrow. Then you might start discovering alt history paths for each nation you play as. For example, you might try to make fascist UK and help Germany in its conquest, only to stab them in the back and build your own world order. But then you discover the workshop, and that's the moment when you stop playing Hearts of Iron 4. 1 second, you are just adding a graphic mod. Next thing you know, you have downloaded countless mods from the workshop. You will probably never touch vanilla again. You're either in Kaiserreich, Old World Blues, The Fire Rises, or even Equestria at War. And at this stage, you're pulling all-nighter just because you want to try out this mod, or you just want to have a short chilling game only to find yourself have played 6 or maybe 8 hours straight without even realizing it. So which stage are you stuck in? Drop it down in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe. And hey, if you enjoy HOI4 content, you might enjoy this video next, so click it and give it a try. Since its release, Hearts of Iron 4 has picked up thousands of mods with all kinds of ideas and wild alternative timelines. Some of them tweak how you play, while others make it feel like you're playing a completely different game. So today we're checking out the biggest mods that claim to change the game and seeing which ones actually live up to that hype. And let's start out with Old World Blues. This mod is basically the Fallout universe brought straight into HOI4. It changes everything. You get fully custom map of North America, a unique Fallout-inspired UI, and over 30 new unit types, from combat robots to weird mutated insects. Plus, there are tons of new nations, each with its own focus tree and its own set of technologies to research. Since it is a total overhaul, every nation actually feels unique. Not all of them share the same tech level. So some are great with armor units, while others focus on robots or bizarre creature units pulled out of Fallout. And it doesn't stop there. Each nation has its own challenges, and some of them are genuinely tough to deal with. The AI will take advantage of any weakness you have. On top of that, each nation comes with its own little storyline, which makes it surprisingly easy to get invested in whatever faction you are playing. The mod also comes with a small, simple economic system that isn't complicated at all, and it's really helpful in the early game when you are trying to prepare for whatever's coming your way. The only thing that feels kind of pointless though is the navy. Sure, you can research ships and naval tech, but you will pretty much never use them. You just don't need a navy in this mod. The New Order probably is a favorite mod to many players, but not for me. I have heard plenty about it and I have seen a lot of people playing it, but personally, I still haven't tried it. It is just not really my cup of tea, and that comes down to a couple of things, one of the biggest being the map style and the color palette. It is just a little too dark for my taste. On top of that, the mod can feel a bit complicated and kinda hard to fully understand, at least for someone like me. But hey, that doesn't mean TNO doesn't deserve a spot on this list. This alternate history mod drops you into a world where the Axis actually won World War II, and the whole thing really shines through its storytelling. It is basically like playing a visual novel that's been merged with a political simulator, and that unique blend is exactly why so many people love it. And here's a big favorite for a huge chunk of the player base, Kaiserreich. This alternate history mod asks the classic question, what if Germany and its allies won World War I? And just like that, you're dropped into a world where communists control France and the UK. Like the New Order, Kaiserreich is famous for its storytelling. It packs in tons of nations with deep lore, but what really makes it stand out is that it managed to keep the vanilla mechanic intact, so players don't feel overwhelmed while diving into this massive world. On top of that, it offers huge, unique focus trees for each nation. And because it is set in an alternate timeline, you get political reworks across basically every country. The mod also comes with a bunch of unique events. Some of them are actually big ones, like the Second Weltkrieg. And let me tell you, when World War II kicks off in this mod, it is an entirely new challenge. Unlike vanilla, Kaiserreich seriously rises the difficulty bar if you're trying to come out on top. The cool part is that World War II feels completely different here, because the political landscape reshuffles alliances, so it doesn't really feel like the World War II we're used to. And compared to the vanilla, Kaiserreich is way deeper and way more replayable. Those gigantic focus trees and the multiple paths for almost every nation make for an incredibly story-driven experience. And honestly, this mod was so influential that it ended up inspiring a ton of other major mods like Kaiser Redux, the New Order, and the Great War Redux. And the next one is Millennium Dawn, the classic modern-day mod that brings modern-day map into the game. This mod loads the game with modern military equipment such as tanks, jets, drones, and even space warfare. But the real centerpiece here is its insanely detailed economic system. We're talking GDP management and national budgets. You will probably find yourself spending most of your time handling budgets and diplomacy instead of fighting wars. Now, while Millennium Dawn does a great job translating the modern world into HOI4, it definitely falls short in the storytelling department. There aren't many scripted events, which hurts replayability a bit. It does include unique focus trees for major nations and a few minor ones, but it's pretty clear most of the efforts went into building that complex economic system. And that system does have a dedicated fan base, even if it takes attention away from actual military gameplay. So yeah, Millennium Dawn isn't a full total conversion like Old World Blues, but it delivers something HOI4 has always kind of been missing: a real economic simulation. The downside? Understanding that system can be as tough as figuring out the Navy in vanilla. But for the players who do manage to wrap their heads around it, there is a ton of enjoyment waiting in this mod. The Fire Rises is basically Millennium Dawn but better. It still gives you a modern day world, but this time it takes everything down to an alternate path toward a full-blown World War III. And honestly, everything Millennium Dawn struggled with, the Fire Rises absolutely nails. The mod features a fully scripted chain of events that flow naturally, from a civil war in Saudi Arabia to a US civil war to China attacking Taiwan and eventually Russia invading Eastern Europe. All of these spirals into a massive World War III scenario, and it is done in a really engaging way. What makes it so fun is how well the scripting is handled. It doesn't just create good gameplay, it also massively boosts replayability, because in this mod, even if a country loses its war, that's not the end of content for them. Every nation has its own unique focus tree that actually branches depending on the outcome of your war. If you lose, you get a special tree focused on rebuilding and preparing for revenge. If you win, you unlock a different path that lets you push your country even further. And the scripted wars? Geniusly impressive. The mod gives both sides clear objectives, so winning isn't just about capitulating the enemy. It is about taking and holding key cities. And let me tell you, the AI in this mod is shockingly competent. For example, in the First European War, if you are playing as Germany or basically any European nation, you're going to struggle hard to stop the Russian advance. The only downside I can really point out is that the mod doesn't have enough content yet. Not every country has a full focus tree, but to be fair, the mod is still a work in progress, so that's completely understandable. And finally, the mod that recently is getting everyone's attention, Equestria at War. With a completely new map, Equestria at War brings a full-on fantasy world into HOI4. This mod throws in magical units, special races, and a ton of fantasy-themed unit types. On top of that, you get a magic research tech slot that is totally unique for each nation, giving every playthrough its own unique play style. What's great is that it managed to do all of this while still keeping most of HOI4's original mechanics intact. So you can jump into it without needing to relearn the entire game or deal with overly complex systems. And of course, the mod delivers deep storytelling through its focus trees, each one tailored and unique to the nation you're playing. Basically, this mod turns HOI4 into a full-blown fantasy grand strategy game, and it does it surprisingly well. What if I told you HOI4 is basically a personality test? Not about politics, but about how much control you need to feel safe. Some people plan every division. Some spam infantry until their PC melts. And others just nuke everyone because it is fun. So in this video, we're going to explore the 6 personalities of HOI4 players. So let's start with the first one, the Micromanager. The Micromanager doesn't play HOI4. He runs it like a corporate operation. He starts every war by pausing the game for 5 minutes. He will rename armies, redesign airplanes, and micromanage supply routes that the attacking forces should take. And when the war finally starts, his plan works not because of luck, but because of absolute control. If this feels a little too familiar, hit subscribe. You will relate to the next one even more, because not everyone has that kind of patience. Which brings us to our next type, the role player. He doesn't play HOI4 to win, he plays it to feel something. For him, HOI4 isn't a strategy game, it's a stage. Every decision tells a story, every war has a reason. He will lose the war on purpose and sacrifice victory just for the immersion, because to him, failure is part of the story. But while he's writing story, someone else is rewriting the borders. The strategist treats every HOI4 match like it's a tournament final. He doesn't play for fun, he plays to dominate. He has got spreadsheets, templates, and maybe a secret Google Doc for every country. Every move, every battle, every plan has meaning. And when he wins, it's never about fun. It's about proof that his plan worked better than yours. But while the strategist perfects the art of war, the exploiter perfects the art of breaking it. The exploiter isn't cheating. He's just using creative mechanics. He will intentionally drain his entire stockpile of guns by training hundreds of useless divisions, just so he can beg other countries for equipment. And when they accept, he cancels the training, gets all his guns back, and keeps theirs. Then he smiles and calls it efficient production. But if the exploiter bends the rules, the Chaos player doesn't even know they exist. The Chaos player doesn't follow the meta, he destroys it. He is the natural disaster of HOI4. Unpredictable, unexplainable, and sometimes unstoppable. To him, planning is optional, and logistics are for other people. He declares war just because the button was there. And he doesn't see HOI4 as a strategy game, he sees it as a sandbox for bad ideas. And then comes the one who turned HOI4 into science. He who plays only for math, the min-maxer. The min-maxer is what happens when the human brain meets too much free time. Every focus, every tick, every division template becomes part of an equation. To him, immersion doesn't matter, only numbers. If something gives even the tiniest bonus, it is worth chasing. He doesn't build armies, he calculates them. And when that army rolls through Europe, it is not luck, it is algebra. If you are still watching, congratulations, you officially have the attention spam of a HOI4 player. Tell me which type you are in the comments and subscribe before your next run turns into a 12-hour session. And if you want to see more HOI4 chaos, then check out this next video. HOI4 multiplayer lobbies pretty much live off one thing: role-playing. But have you ever wondered how each major country would act if they were actually players in one of those games? Well, today we're diving into exactly that. And hey, let me know if you end up behaving like any of the countries we talk about in this video. Germany is the main player or villain in the game. They would unpause the game and immediately start looking for someone to bully. No warm-up, no economy setup. The timer hits day 1 and Germany is already justifying war goals like they are late for something. This is that sweaty friend who treats every multiplayer game like a tournament and refuses to let anyone breathe. Their divisions look like they were built in a calculator. Perfect tank templates, perfect stats, perfect supply lines. They micro so hard that every single battle looks like a speed run. Germany is always zooming around the map, aggressively clicking, pinning enemy lines, and yelling at the game because why is planning bonus taking so long? Their research tab is basically 3 things: tanks, planes, and more tanks. Anything peaceful is ignored like it is DLC they don't own. Every focus that gives factories or army buffs is locked in the moment it appears. Germany's whole playstyle is I must be overpowered before anyone else wakes up. While Germany is sprinting across the map, France is sitting calmly behind a wall of forts, building more forts and hovering over the pause button like it is a life support machine. This is the player who spends half the game preparing for an attack that might come any second, then panics the moment it actually happens. France in HOI4 is that person who fills the entire border with infantry, stacks defensive generals, upgrades nothing but entrenchment bonuses, and genuinely believes no one will ever get through their walls. But the second Germany starts pushing, their entire screen turns red and the panic mode activates instantly. This is the player who types "Guys, help!" in chat every 3 minutes. One front line collapses and they are already reaching for their surrender button like it is muscle memory. France always relies on allies to carry the offense, constantly asking the UK or USSR, "Can someone please open a second front or I'm dead?" Watching France in multiplayer is like watching a friend set up a beautiful trap, then the enemy just ignores it. It's dramatic, it is painful, and honestly, it is one of the most relatable HOI4 experiences ever. The UK is playing the game on a completely different level. If France is the defensive camper, the UK is the player who spends hours micromanaging fleets, moving troops across oceans, and somehow dominating half the map without ever breaking a sweat. UK in HOI4 love to spam ships, control islands, and secure every convoy route. Meanwhile, everyone else on the server is screaming in chat for help on land, and the UK just nods quietly like, yeah, I've got this. Sometimes they even go AFK because they have the biggest empire to manage. Yet, somehow nothing explodes. They are also the quiet support player. Lend-lease, strategic resources, reinforcements, you barely notice it at first. But by mid-game, their allies are thriving, while Germany is screaming, where did all their stuff come from? Every HOI4 veteran knows this type, the player who spends more time on fleets than land combat, yet somehow wins the war behind the scenes. The USA is quietly stacking factories, researching tech, and turning their corner of the map into a production nightmare. If France is panicking and Germany is speed rushing, the USA is that player who spends the early years looking harmless, while secretly building a late-game army that will crush anyone in its way. For the first few years, they seem innocent. Military factories slowly tick up, dockyards expand, and research focuses on advanced tanks, planes, and ships. Other players might ignore them, thinking they are just chilling. But when the USA finally logs in fully ready, the game changes instantly. Suddenly, the entire lobby realizes this quiet corner player is now the biggest threat. This is the player who seems slow and safe for years, then, in one turn, flips the entire map upside down. And while the USA is slowly building an unstoppable war machine, the USSR is already sitting on the mountain of divisions, ready to crush anyone who dares to attack. In multiplayer, the USSR spends the early game building thousands of divisions, constantly reinforcing and focusing on defensive doctrines. They aren't flashy or fast, but their strength lies in their sheer numbers. HOI4 players know this pain. One bad push and your divisions are shredded while the USSR keeps coming. By mid-game, they start rolling out massive tanks and a huge number of artilleries, turning defensive lines into unstoppable counterattack machines. This is the player who lets others throw their best armies at them, absorbs the damage, and then counters with overwhelming force. And lastly, Japan. Japan is the player who grabs 20 islands, launches naval invasions everywhere, and constantly juggles fleets and land forces, all while ignoring parts of the map until forced to react. Every move is high risk. Every battle could collapse instantly, and one misclicked fleet can ruin an entire campaign. Japan is chaotic, aggressive, and a little reckless. They spread forces thin, fight on multiple fronts, and somehow survive just long enough to make the late game terrifying for everyone else. Now imagine all of these players in one multiplayer lobby. Germany rushing through enemy lines, France panicking behind forts, the UK micromanaging fleets across continents, the USSR spamming endless divisions, the USA rolling in with industrial might, and Japan hopping from island to island, and micromanagement stress. And you have a classic HOI4 multiplayer madness. So that's how HOI4 players act if they embodied each country. Rushing, camping, spamming, and overextending. Which country do you play like in multiplayer? Drop a comment below and let me know your favorite nation. Winning every battle in HOI4 really comes down to the kind of divisions you're using. Every division has its own role, some are meant to hold the line, others are built to push forward, and some are best for garrison duty. But when you really understand how to design these divisions properly, it can completely turn the tide of a war. So in this video, I'm going to show you 6 different types of divisions that will help you win battles with ease. Let's start with the special forces. These include paratroopers, marines, mountaineers, and rangers. And each one of these shines in specific terrain. Mountaineers, for example, dominates mountains, while rangers are great in forests and jungles. These elite divisions usually have high organization and deal solid soft attack damage, which is why pairing them with artillery can make them absolutely devastating. You can also throw in anti-air to reduce the damage they might take from enemy planes. It really depends on who you are fighting, so you've got some freedom to get creative when designing these divisions. They are mainly used for pushing enemy lines, and if you know where to break through, you can even pull off some really clean encirclements. Special forces are also relatively cheap to train, since they mostly require guns, support equipment, and some artillery. The downside though is that you can't train a ton of them. There is a cap based on how many regular divisions you have, but you can increase that cap through political advisors, national focuses, and doctrines. I personally use special forces in most of my games as my main pushing units. They are just really good at breaking through enemy lines. Next up is a unit specifically designed for breaking enemy lines, and it is even more devastating than special forces: the medium tank division. Now, there are many ways to design a tank division. Some players prefer light or heavy tanks, but medium tanks hit the sweet spot for me, especially when paired with motorized infantry to increase division organization and self-propelled artillery. Their high soft attack allows them to melt through infantry and light armored units, making it easy to push enemy lines and set up encirclements. The key to a successful tank division lies in tank design. You should prioritize weapons that increase soft attack, such as howitzers, and equipment that boosts breakthrough like radios. Using the best available modules makes your tanks far more effective, which is why researching advanced artillery, anti-tank, and anti-air technologies is essential. Continuously upgrading your tanks ensures they stay competitive on the battlefield. Now, while medium tanks are a powerful force, they are also expensive to produce. You need to produce not only the tanks themselves, but also self-propelled artillery and motorized units. Removing SP artillery can reduce costs, but it significantly lowers combat effectiveness. Tanks also require a steady supply of fuel. Without it, they become useless. Because of this, tank divisions are a high-risk, high-reward investment. If you have the industrial capacity and fuel to support them, they are absolutely worth producing. While medium tank divisions excel at fighting lightly armored units, tank destroyers specialize in eliminating tanks and other heavily armored units. I rarely use them in single players since the vanilla AI doesn't field strong tank divisions, but in multiplayer or when using a competent AI mod, they become extremely valuable. When paired with medium tanks to provide additional soft attack, tank destroyers create a division capable of dealing with both armored and unarmored units. Like the medium tank divisions discussed earlier, their effectiveness depends heavily on how you design them. The top priority when building tank destroyers is maximizing heart attack. By adding 2 tank destroyer battalions to a tank division, you create a force that can effectively crush almost anything in its path. Next up is a division that isn't really meant for attacking, but it is basically the backbone of your army. This is going to make up the biggest portion of your forces. The main role of line infantry is to hold the line while your elite attack divisions do the pushing. Their job is to make sure the enemy doesn't slip through and grab any tiles behind your tanks or special forces, keeping your push divisions safe from getting encircled. Line infantry are also relatively cheap to produce. They usually consist of just infantry with support artillery and an engineer company. And if you've got the production to spare, you can even add line artillery to make them a bit stronger. Another thing I like to do is to add a signal company to increase their initiative, since reinforcement rate is really important for this kind of division. And just like line infantry, garrison are not meant to attack or push. Their role is to garrison your newly occupied lands to reduce resistance. They are the cheapest division in your army. Normally, a couple of cavalry units with good military police can do the job. That's why it is important to research advanced level of military police, because they help you a lot in calming down the resistance. And that way, you can reduce both the equipment usage and the manpower needed to garrison your occupied territories. And finally, we've got the division that is banned in most multiplayer lobbies: the Space Marine. The basic idea is to stick 1 or 2 armored units into an infantry division, so it gains armor value, making it much harder for the enemy to deal damage to it. Space Marines can be built in a lot of different ways, and it is not just about throwing a couple of tanks into a normal infantry division. The armored unit can be a tank or even SP artillery or SP anti-air. You're also not limited to infantry either. You can apply this idea to special forces divisions to make them even stronger. Space Marines really excel at defense. They can also be used offensively if you design them that way. The added armor value gives them extra protection. Even though they are banned in multiplayer, you can still use them in single player. This type of division can be expensive or cheap to produce depending on how you design it. But generally, they are not as expensive as full tank divisions, but they are also not as cheap as line infantry. With that being said, I personally haven't used them much. I might give them a try just to see how really broken they are. Of course, we only covered a handful of divisions here, so these definitely aren't the only ones you can make in HOI4. You can always design your own divisions based on your needs and overall goals. And also don't forget about the Air Force, because it can make your army way stronger. So let me know what you think. Do you actually use these divisions? Which one is your favorite? And if you have come up with another broken division, make sure to share it in the comments. I'd love to try it out. Paradox is famous for its overly complicated strategy games that require players to invest a lot of hours just to understand how they work. And Hearts of Iron 4 is no exception. Even though HOI4 has proven its success and popularity nearly 10 years after its release, a lot of players still don't touch it. And it is not because the game is bad. It is simply because many people don't want to invest that much time just learning how to play. That said, HOI4 isn't only aimed at players who are willing to sink hundreds of hours into mastering it. It also appeals to people with different interests and even different occupations. Those who find something uniquely engaging in the game beyond just gameplay itself. Let's take people who are interested in history, for example. Those are usually the kind of people who love reading or just learning more about events that happened in the past, especially the big ones. And Hearts of Iron 4 clearly grabs their attention, since it is set in one of the most interesting timelines in history, World War II. The game doesn't just let them read about how this unpleasant war broke out, it lets them live through it, experiencing every major event that led up to World War II. On top of that, HOI4 encourages them to ask what-if questions. It makes players think about how much history could have changed if certain events were to take a different turn, by offering multiple alternative history paths for each country. And by doing all of this, HOI4 makes players feel like they can actually affect history, the very thing they love so much. And even though HOI4 doesn't go as deep into economics as something like Victoria 3, it still grabs the attention of people who are really into economy. And honestly, the Steam Workshop alone is enough to pull in anyone who loves that side of strategy games. There are tons of mods that add complex economic mechanics to the game. The most complicated one I have come across so far is Millennium Dawn. And I am not even kidding. It is actually the reason I don't play that version of the mod. It is so detailed and layered that you'll need hundreds of hours just to fully understand how that system works. But I have gotta say, it is insanely realistic. It doesn't just attract economics enthusiasts, it also pulls in players who want a deep modern country management simulation. If you are the kind of person who wants to handle budgets, debts, production chains, and long-term planning in a believable way, it really delivers. Now, if that level of complexity sounds overwhelming, don't worry. There are other mods that introduce economic system in a much simpler way. Mods like the Fire Rises and Old World Blues. They still brings economics into the mix, but without requiring a full-on degree to understand what is going on. So there is really something for everyone here in the game. And since HOI4 is way more focused on the military side of things, it naturally attracts people who love commanding armies or at least want to feel like they are in that role. That's why you see so many players who enjoy planning attacks, setting up defenses, and crafting strategies absolutely love this game. It really sells you that feeling of training, organizing, and leading an army to take on other nations. But leading an army in HOI4 isn't just about designing a cool division templates and hitting train. It goes way deeper than that. You have got to think about your air force, your navy, the terrain you are fighting in, whether it is mountain, deserts, or forests, and most importantly, you need to pay attention to supplies. Because in this game, supplies are everything. And it is realistic too, because history has shown us that even the most powerful armies, ones that conquered massive territories, ended up losing simply because their supply networks collapsed. They couldn't feed their troops, fuel their tanks, or reinforce the front lines. And HOI4 captures that perfectly. In this game, supply isn't just a mechanic, it is the mechanic. It can single-handedly determine whether you win or lose a campaign. That's why I always say in my videos, supply is the final boss of HOI4. So yeah, being a general in this game means juggling a lot. Logistics, coordination, long-term planning, not just throwing units at the front line. And honestly, the game does an amazing job simulating that whole experience. But of course, a game like Hearts of Iron 4 can't really call itself complete without its political side. And that's exactly where all the politics enjoyers get pulled in. Because here's the thing. Before you even think about launching some massive campaign or steamrolling across continents, you actually have to build a nation that's capable of doing it. And that doesn't just happen automatically. You need proper management, you need planning, you need direction. And that's where politics becomes absolutely essential. You're not just moving troops around the map, you are shaping an entire country. You can appoint political advisor who can help you mold your nation into whatever vision you've got in your head. Want to shift your ideology? Go for it. You want to completely overthrow the current government and spark a revolution? You can do that too. The game gives you the tools to redefine your country from the inside out. And then there's the global stage. You can create factions, or you can join existing ones. You can make allies, and at the exact same time create powerful enemies. Every political decision you take has to serve your long-term national goal. Are you preparing for war, trying to dominate your region, or playing the long diplomatic game? Politics is the foundation of all of it. Now here's where it gets really fun. Multiplayer. Because politics in single player is one thing, but in multiplayer lobby, that's where it becomes next level. Suddenly, diplomacy isn't just AI numbers and scripted responses. You're negotiating with real people. You're making deals, signing treaties, forming secret agreements, and one conversation can completely change the outcome of the entire match. Sometimes you win wars before they even start, just through diplomacy. And we can't forget the roleplay lobbies. Those are a whole different vibe. Players step into the shoes of historical leaders and fully commit to making decisions based on their personalities and ideologies. If you love politics and you love role-playing, this is where the game really shines. It adds flavor, tension, and unpredictability in a way that single player just can't replicate. And let's not overlook another big audience this game attracts: the management crowd. At the end of the day, you are running a country. That means managing the economy, directing military production, balancing diplomacy, maintaining stability, all of it. And if you enjoy all of this game scratches that itch perfectly. So yeah, Hearts of Iron 4 isn't just a war game. It is a political sandbox, a management simulator, a diplomatic chess match, and when you put all of that together, especially in multiplayer, that's when it becomes something truly special. We have always had 4 main ideologies to choose from when shaping our nation in Hearts of Iron 4. Each one comes with its own flavor, mechanics, strengths, and trade-offs. But let's be honest, one of them has always had a bit of a reputation. Out of the 4 ideologies, democracy is usually seen as the weakest option, the boring one, the restrictive one, the one that kind of ties your hands while everyone else is out there justifying wars and painting the map. And yeah, it's a little ironic. Some of the strongest countries in the game, like the United States and the United Kingdom, start as democracies. Historically, they became absolute powerhouses. Yet, in HOI4, picking democracy often feels like you are voluntarily choosing to limit yourself. You can't just declare war whenever you want. You are locked behind war tension requirements. Your expansion options feels constrained. Meanwhile, fascists and communists are out there rewriting borders before 1938. So the big question is democracy actually the weakest ideology in HOI4? And more importantly, does the way the game portrays it reflect how democracies functioned in the real world during that era? Because if the strongest nations on Earth were democracies, why does playing one sometimes feel like playing on hard mode? If you are being real, playing fascist or communist has always been the fun way to play Hearts of Iron 4. Why? Because those ideologies let you go all in. They let you optimize your nation to be as strong and efficient as possible in their own distinct flavor. Want to crank your manpower through the roof early? Go ahead. Both fascism and communism let you jump to extensive conscription way earlier without even being at war. Meanwhile, democracies are just sitting there politely waiting for global chaos to justify drafting half their population. Same story with economic laws. As a fascist or communist nation, you can switch to war economy before World War II even kicks off. That's massive. You're boosting factory output, accelerating military production, and basically preparing for war while everyone else is still pretending peace might last. And that advantage snowballs fast. You build your economy earlier, you train divisions faster, you stockpile equipment sooner. You're just ahead. And it doesn't stop there. These ideologies also let you justify war goal on other countries without needing high war tension. So while democratic nations are locked behind global thresholds, fascists and communists are already expanding, annexing neighbors, grabbing resources, and growing stronger before 1939 even rolls around. So from a gameplay perspective, it is easy to see why players come to see the same conclusion. Democracy feels nerfed. It feels like the hard mode ideology, especially if you are playing a smaller nation where every factory and every manpower point matters. When you can justify early wars, can't change laws freely, and can't mobilize your economy immediately, you feel like you're always reacting instead of acting. Meanwhile, the other ideologies, they are directing the pace of the game. And that's what makes so many players believe that in HOI4, democracy isn't just balanced differently. It is straight up disadvantaged. But here's where things get interesting. Democratic nations aren't actually weak, they are just delayed. Because once they fully enter a war, they often becomes the deciding factor. Think about it. When the United States joined the war in Hearts of Iron 4, what do most Germany players try to do? End the war before that happens. If you're playing Germany, you rush to knock out the Allies early, because you know that once the United States is in, the entire dynamic shifts. The war stops being manageable and starts becoming a nightmare. And yeah, there are a lot of reasons for that. First, geography. The United States is far away. Invading it isn't simple. You need naval superiority, convoy protection, a proper landing force, the whole package. And getting that kind of naval control is already a massive challenge. Because another major democratic powerhouse, the United Kingdom, is out there dominating the seas with its own enormous navy. In most games, the UK controls huge portions of the world's oceans, and trying to contest that while also fighting on land? Well, good luck. So, doesn't that contradict the idea that democracy is the nerfed ideology? Well, not really, because here's the truth. The US and the UK start in strong positions. Their power isn't coming purely from the democratic ideology. It is coming from their industry, geography, colonies, and national focus trees. The US, for example, isn't insanely strong in 1936. It has debuffs, political restrictions, and limited mobilization. But once you hit 1940, once those focuses kick in and the economy ramps up, it turns into an industrial monster. Massive land, massive resources, insane factory potential. That's not democracy being overpowered. That's the United States being the United States. Now, let's try something else. Take a mid-tier or small nation, flip it democratic. Compare that path to its fascist or communist alternatives. Suddenly, you feel that difference immediately. You can't justify early wars, you can't aggressively expand, you can't freely ramp up conscription and economy. And unlike the US or UK, you don't have a giant industrial base to fall back on. You don't have global naval dominance. You don't have built-in late-game scaling that automatically makes you a superpower. Most smaller democratic nations simply cannot survive alone. They rely on faction support. They rely on guarantees. They rely on the collective strength of other democracies. So no, democracy isn't weak in HOI4, but unless you are already starting as a global powerhouse, it absolutely feels limited. And that's the real difference. Democracy scales with alliances. Authoritarian ideologies scale with aggression. And depending on what kind of game you want to play, that changes everything. So how does all of this actually reflect the real world? Well, democratic nations are built around giving people a voice, and historically, those people usually aren't too excited about jumping into wars. Public opinion matters. Elections matter. That naturally limits how freely a democratic government can just wake up one day and say, "Alright, we're invading someone." Democracies tend to focus more on internal development and maintaining peace, at least until they are directly threatened. They can just spike conscription overnight, or flip their entire economy into wartime production without political consequences. And that's exactly what you feel when you play democracy in Hearts of Iron 4. You are restricted. You need war tension. You need justification. You need time. Authoritarian regimes, on the other hand, don't really have those breaks. If war serves their interests, they go for it. Public opinion isn't a limiting factor in the same way. They can mobilize fast, redirect the entire economy towards military production, and escalate aggressively. That flexibility is powerful, but it is also dangerous. And here's the interesting part. HOI4 actually models that trade-off really well. Authoritarian ideologies in the game give you that early freedom, but they often push you into expansion to sustain yourself. A perfect example is Germany's path with the 4-year plan focus. Once you start down that road, you're heavily, almost forced to rapidly expand, seize resources and keep the momentum going. That mirrors how Nazi Germany's real-world economy functioned, heavily geared toward rearmament and territorial expansion. In-game, if you stop expanding as Germany, your economic growth slows, your resources problems pile up, and your war machine starts to struggle. You are built for constant aggression. The moment you stall, the cracks begin to show. And that's often how Germany loses in HOI4. Once they can't keep conquering new territories, their economy weakens, their production falls behind, and eventually they get outscaled. The very system that made them powerful early becomes unsustainable long-term. So in a weird way, HOI4 doesn't just nerf democracy for balance. It actually reflects the real-world strength and weaknesses of different political systems. Democracies are slower and more restricted early on, but stable and scalable. Authoritarian regimes, on the other hand, are explosive and aggressive, but often dependent on constant momentum to survive. And that tension, that's what makes the game so interesting.